Sophia Williams once had a big dream: to open a small bakery of her own where she could create sweet treats and bring happiness to others. But when she married Michael Carter, a busy businessman, she put her dreams aside to focus on her family. Sophia became a devoted wife and a loving mother to her two sons, John, 9 years old, and Jin, 6 years old. Every day, she woke up early to prepare breakfast, care for her husband and children, and do everything to maintain a happy home. She truly believed she had it all: a perfect family and a husband she could trust. But then, everything fell apart in the cruelest way possible. Michael had secretly orchestrated a scheme to trick Sophia into signing over all their assets without her realizing it. By the time she uncovered the truth, it was too late. In a single afternoon, Michael kicked her and their two sons out of their own home. "You and the kids are no longer my responsibility. Go take care of yourself," Michael said coldly as he tossed their belongings onto the street. To Sophia's utter shock, another woman stepped inside the house. A younger, elegant woman, clearly the one who had replaced her. She couldn't believe what was happening. Just hours ago, she had been Michael's wife, living under that roof. Now, she and her two sons were homeless, penniless, and abandoned. With nowhere to go and no one to turn to, Sophia held John and Jin's hands tightly as they wandered through the streets. As night fell, exhaustion set in. John's small legs wobbled, and Jin clung tightly to her side. She had to find a place, any place, for them to rest. After hours of searching, Sophia spotted a small diner with its lights still on. The warmth inside looked inviting, even if they could only sit outside. With a heavy heart, she guided her sons to the steps and sat down. It wasn't home, but at least it was a temporary refuge. Sophia had managed to find a job as a kitchen assistant, but her first paycheck was still far away. The only thing she could afford was a small sandwich. Forcing a smile, she tore the sandwich into 3 pieces and spoke softly to her boys. "We can think of this as a special little feast, can't we?" John and Jin nodded, trying to stay cheerful, but Sophia could see the exhaustion and hunger in their eyes. Just then, a sleek, expensive car pulled up nearby. The door opened, and a tall man stepped out. He carried himself with power, yet his eyes held shock and concern the moment they landed on her. "Sophia? Is that really you?" Sophia froze at the sound of her name. It had been so long since someone had spoken it with genuine concern. She slowly lifted her head, and standing before her was Richard Bennett, a friend from high school she hadn't seen in years. Richard was no longer the quiet, reserved boy she remembered. Now, he carried himself with the confidence of a man who had built an empire. Dressed in a tailored suit, wearing an expensive watch that gleamed under the streetlights, he looked every bit the billionaire the world knew him as. But his eyes, as they locked onto hers, held no arrogance, only shock and concern. "Sophia, what happened to you?" Richard asked, his voice filled with worry as he glanced at the 2 boys sitting beside her. Sophia immediately looked away, ashamed. The last thing she wanted was for someone from her past, especially someone like Richard, to see her like this. "Nothing, I'm fine," she said softly, trying to keep her voice steady. But Richard wasn't convinced. His gaze shifted to the small sandwich they were sharing, then to the thin jackets John and Jin were wearing in the cold night air. He didn't need Sophia to explain. He could see the truth for himself. "Sophia, do you and the boys have somewhere to go?" She tightened her grip on John and Jin's hands, hesitating. Sophia had always told herself she could handle things alone, but the reality was stark. They were homeless, barely getting by, and had no one to turn to. Richard let out a slow breath before speaking again, his tone gentle yet firm. "I can't leave you out here. Come stay at my place tonight. Just for one night. I promise." Sophia looked at him, uncertain. She had never been the type to rely on others, but when she glanced at her sons, 2 little boys shivering from the cold, she knew she couldn't let her pride hurt them. "Just temporarily, Richard," she said quietly, determination in her voice. Richard offered a reassuring smile. "All right, but you don't have to do this alone anymore." He knelt down, helping her gather the few belongings she had, then opened the car door for her and the boys. As the car drove off into the night, Sophia felt something she hadn't in a very long time. A small flicker of hope. The car glided through the quiet streets, the glow of streetlights reflecting off the sleek interior. Sophia stared out the window, her emotions tangled. She still couldn't believe she was sitting in a luxury car next to Richard Bennett, a man the world admired. She turned to look at her sons. John and Jin had fallen asleep in the back seat, their small bodies curled up in exhaustion. Seeing their innocent faces, a sharp pang of guilt pierced through her chest. She had once promised herself that she would always provide for them, yet here they were, homeless, cold, and barely getting by. After about 20 minutes, the car pulled up in front of a vast mansion by the ocean. Sophia hesitated as she took in the grandeur of the estate. "Richard, I don't know if I should..." Richard placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "It's just for one night, Sophia. You don't have to worry." As she stepped inside, Sophia was taken aback by the warmth and elegance of Richard's home. Unlike the cold, impersonal luxury she had imagined, the house was beautifully designed, inviting, and filled with soft golden light. There was a sense of comfort woven into every detail, from the carefully chosen artwork to the plush furniture. Richard led her and the boys to a spacious guest room, complete with thick blankets, fresh clothes, and a small table set with a bowl of steaming hot soup. "Get some rest. You and the kids need this," he said, his voice gentle. Sophia clenched her fingers together as she watched John and Jin sleeping peacefully in the soft bed. For the first time in months, she felt safe. But deep inside, she couldn't shake the question lingering in her mind. Could she really accept this help? The next morning, sunlight streamed through the large windows, casting a golden glow over the elegant guest room where Sophia and her son slept. She blinked, momentarily disoriented. This wasn't a cold sidewalk or a hard park bench. This was a warm, comfortable bed wrapped in soft blankets, with the faint aroma of freshly baked bread drifting in from downstairs. She turned to look at her boys. John and Jin were still fast asleep, their faces peaceful for the first time in months. Sophia tucked the blanket around them and felt a small weight lift from her heart. Downstairs, Richard was already awake. When Sophia made her way to the kitchen, she was surprised to see him, dressed casually in a simple shirt, standing by the coffee machine. But what caught her attention the most was what was on the dining table. A tray of freshly baked pastries. "You made these yourself?" Sophia asked, stunned. Richard smiled and handed her one. "Remember back in high school? You were the first person who taught me how to bake. I never forgot." Sophia hesitated before taking the pastry, her heart stirring with something unfamiliar. It had been so long since she had touched dough, since she had smelled the warm, buttery scent of a fresh bake. Noticing the uncertainty in her eyes, Richard asked gently, "Sophia, have you ever thought about going back to your dream?" Sophia lowered her gaze, her hands tightening around the pastry. "I'm not that person anymore, Richard. I lost everything." Richard shook his head. "You're still you. You just need a chance to start again." Sophia looked up at him, her eyes filled with doubt and a flicker of hope. For the first time in so long, she wondered, could she really find herself again? After spending several days at Richard's house, Sophia finally felt some sense of stability. She no longer had to worry about her children going hungry or sleeping on the streets. However, a part of her still couldn't let go of the past where Michael had stripped her of everything and abandoned John and Jin without a second thought. After many sleepless nights, Sophia made a decision. She needed to confront Michael and demand that he take responsibility for their children. She arranged to meet him at a high-end cafe, the same place they used to go together. When Michael walked in, he looked more wealthy than ever, dressed in an expensive suit with a luxury watch on his wrist. But his eyes were as cold and indifferent as the day he threw her and the kids out. "Sophia, what do you want?" Michael's voice was laced with irritation. Sophia took a deep breath, keeping her voice steady. "I'm not here for me. I'm here for John and Jin. They are your sons, Michael. You owe them at least that much." Michael smirked, leaning back in his chair. "I owe them nothing. You should have known better than to expect loyalty from me." Sophia felt her fists clench under the table, but she refused to show weakness. Instead, she let out a breath and smiled. A small, knowing smile. You're right, Michael. I should have known better, and now I do. She stood up, pushing the chair back. John and Jin don't need a father like you. They already have someone who truly cares about them, someone who doesn't see them as a burden. Michael's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second, but Sophia didn't wait for a response. With her head held high, she turned and walked away, leaving the past behind for good. As Sophia walked out of the cafe, she felt lighter than ever. She had confronted Michael, had heard his cold indifference firsthand, and finally, she was free. From that moment on, she no longer expected anything from him. She would build a future for John and Jin on her own. When she returned to Richard's house, the boys ran up to her excitedly. "Mom, Uncle Richard took us out for ice cream." Jin beamed, still holding a tiny spoon. Sophia glanced at Richard, who stood nearby with a soft smile. A strange warmth filled her chest, something she hadn't felt in a long time. In the days that followed, Richard became more than just a helping hand. He became an important part of John and Jin's lives. He took them to the park, helped John with his math homework, and read bedtime stories to Jin. One evening, as Sophia was washing dishes in the kitchen, John and Jin came running in, their faces serious. "Mom, we need to tell you something," John said. Sophia dried her hands and sat down. "What is it, sweetie?" Jin hesitated before speaking softly. "We don't think we need someone like Dad anymore." John nodded. "But Uncle Richard is really good to us. He listens, plays with us, and protects us. We don't know if he's like a dad, but if we could choose one, we'd choose him." Sophia froze. Tears welled up in her eyes, not from sadness, but from overwhelming emotion. She looked at Richard, the man who had no obligation to her or her children, yet had stepped into their lives with open arms. Richard knelt down and gently pulled John and Jin into a hug. "Whenever you need me, I'll always be here." And for the first time in so long, Sophia felt like her family was whole again. Sophia sat on the balcony, watching the soft hues of the sunset melt into the ocean waves. She reflected on the past few months. Losing everything, becoming homeless, then meeting Richard again, the man who had helped rebuild her and her children's lives. The sound of footsteps approached behind her. Richard walked over, holding 2 cups of hot tea. He sat beside her, handing her one. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his voice calm and steady. Sophia gave a small smile, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "About everything. About how I once thought my life was beyond saving, and then you appeared." Richard held her gaze for a long moment before setting his tea down. "Sophia, I don't just want to help you get back on your feet. I want to be a part of your life, not just for now, but forever." Sophia's heart pounded. She had always known Richard cared for her and the boys, but hearing those words from him made her feel both overwhelmed and afraid. "Richard, I don't know if I can love again," she admitted softly. "I'm scared that if I open my heart, everything will fall apart again." Richard gently took her hand in his. "Sometimes moving forward means taking a leap of faith. And I promise you, Sophia, I won't let you or the boys get hurt again." She looked into his eyes, seeing nothing but honesty and unwavering devotion. For the first time in years, she felt like she could trust again. A few months later, Sophia's life had transformed in ways she never imagined. With Richard's support, she had completed a professional baking course and started taking her first real orders. Before long, she opened her very own small bakery in an upscale neighborhood, with Richard helping her every step of the way. On opening day, Sophia stood in front of the shop, feeling both excited and emotional. The sign above the entrance read, "Sophia's Bakery, baked from the heart." As the first customers walked in and she saw the joy on their faces as they tasted her pastries, she knew she had finally reclaimed her dreams. That evening, Richard hosted a small celebration at home in her honor. After the guests had left, Sophia stepped onto the balcony for a moment of quiet, but when she turned back, she froze. Richard was down on one knee, holding a sparkling ring. "Sophia, from the moment I saw you again, I knew you were still the same incredible woman I admired years ago, but now I admire you for so much more," I've watched you fight for your children, rebuild your life, and find yourself again. And every step of the way, I've fallen more in love with you. I don't just want to be part of your life. I want to be your family. I want to wake up beside you every morning, laugh with John and Jin, and build a future together. Sophia Williams, will you marry me? Tears filled Sophia's eyes as she nodded, overwhelmed with emotion. Yes, Richard, I will. Their wedding was intimate and filled with warmth, attended by close friends. John and Jin were overjoyed to wear matching suits, standing proudly beside Richard as his miniature best men. But the most touching moment was when Richard officially adopted the boys, becoming the father they had always dreamed of. From then on, Sophia, Richard, John, and Jin built a life filled with love, laughter, and unwavering support. Sophia continued to grow her bakery, while Richard, despite his busy billionaire schedule, always made time to take the boys on adventures and be there for his family. Their family wasn't perfect. There were still challenges, sleepless nights, and moments of doubt. But through it all, there was love, trust, and the unwavering belief that they had finally found where they belonged. John and Jin no longer questioned if they had a father. They had Richard, someone who chose them every single day. And as Sophia watched her boys run through the garden, Richard's laughter echoing beside hers, she knew this was the life she had fought for, and it was only just beginning.